This play is sponsored by the California Civil Liberties Public Education Program, a state-funded grant project of the California State Library.
LA Theater Works presents the Alliance Theater production of Native Guard by Natasha Trethewey, directed for radio by Rosalind Ayres.
Again, the fields. No more muskets. The bone-drag weariness of marching, the trampled grass, soaked earth red as the wine of sacrament. Now, the veteran turns toward a new field, bright as domes of the Republic. Here, he has shrugged off the past, his jacket and canteen flung down in the corner. At the center of the painting, he anchors the Trinity, joining earth and sky. The wheat falls beneath his scythe, a language of bounty, the swaths like scripture on the field's open page. Boundless, the wheat stretches beyond the frame, as if toward a distant field, the white canvas where sky and cotton meet, where another veteran toils, his hands the color of dark soil.
Oh, magnet South! Oh, glistening, perfumed South. My South. Oh, quick metal, rich blood, impulse and love. Good and evil. Oh, all dear to me. Walt Whitman.
Pastoral. In the dream, I am with the fugitive poets. We're gathered for a photograph. Behind us, the skyline of Atlanta, hidden by the photographer's backdrop. A lush pasture, green, full of soft-eyed cows lowing. A chant that sounds like, "No, no." "Yes," I say to the glass of bourbon I'm offered. We're lining up now. Robert Penn Warren, his voice just audible above the drone of bulldozers, telling us where to stand. "Say race," the photographer croons. I'm in blackface again when the flash freezes us. My father's white, I tell them, and rural. "You don't hate the South?" they ask. "You don't hate it?" Miscegenation. In 1965, my parents broke 2 laws of Mississippi. They went to Ohio to marry, returned to Mississippi. They crossed the river into Cincinnati, a city whose name begins with a sound like sin, the sound of wrong, miss in Mississippi. A year later, they moved to Canada, followed a route the same as slaves, the train slicing the white glaze of winter, leaving Mississippi. Faulkner's Joe Christmas was born in winter, like Jesus, given his name for the day he was left at the orphanage, his race unknown in Mississippi. My father was reading War and Peace when he gave me my name. I was born near Easter, 1966, in Mississippi. When I turned 33, my father said, "It's your Jesus year. You're the same age he was when he died." It was spring, the hills green in Mississippi. I know more than Joe Christmas did. Natasha is a Russian name, though I'm not. It means Christmas child, even in Mississippi. My mother dreams another country. Already, the words are changing. She is changing from colored to Negro, Black still years ahead. This is 1966. She is married to a white man, and there are more names for what grows inside her. It is enough to worry about words like mongrel and the infertility of mules and mulattoes while flipping through a book of baby names. She has come home to wait out the long months, her room unchanged since she's been gone, dolls winking down from every shelf, all of them white. Every day, she is flanked by the rituals of superstition, and there is a name she will learn for this, too: maternal impression. The shape, like an unknown country, marking the back of the newborn's thigh. For now, women tell her to clear her head, to steady her hands, or she'll gray a lock of the child's hair wherever she worries her own, imprint somewhere the outline of a thing she craves too much. They tell her to stanch her cravings by eating dirt. All spring, she has sat on her hands, her fingers numb. For a while, each day she can't feel anything she touches. The arbor out back, the landscape's green tangle, the molehill of her own swelling. Here, outside the city limits, cars speed by, clouds of red dust in their wake. She breathes it in. Mississippi. Then drifts toward sleep, thinking of some place she's never been. Late, Mississippi is a dark backdrop bearing down on the windows of her room. On the TV in the corner, the station signs off, broadcasting its nightly salutation. The waving stars and stripes, our national anthem. Southern history. Before the war, they were happy, he said, quoting our textbook. This was senior year history class. The slaves were clothed, fed, and better off under a master's care. I watched the words blur on the page. No one raised a hand, disagreed, not even me. It was late. We still had Reconstruction to cover before the test, and, luckily, 3 hours of watching Gone with the Wind. History, the teacher said, of the Old South, a true account of how things were back then. On screen, a slave stood big as life, big mouth, bucked eyes, our textbooks grinning proof, a lie my teacher guarded. Silent, so did I. Blonde. Certainly it was possible, somewhere in my parents' genes, the recessive traits that might have given me a different look. Not attached earlobes or my father's green eyes, but another hair color. Gentleman preferred, have more fun, blonde. And with my skin color, like a good tan, an even mix of my parents', I could have passed for white. When on Christmas Day I woke to find a blonde wig, a pink sequined tutu, and a blonde ballerina doll nearly tall as me, I didn't know to ask, nor that it mattered if there'd been a brown version. This was years before my grandmother nestled the dark baby into our creche. Years before I'd understand it as primer for a Mississippi childhood. Instead, I pranced around our living room in a whirl of possibility, my parents looking on at their suddenly strange child. In the photograph my mother took, my father, almost out of the frame, looks on as Joseph must have at the miraculous birth. I'm in the foreground, my blonde wig a shining halo, a newborn likeness to the child that chance, the long odds, might have brought. Southern Gothic. I have lain down into 1970, into the bed my parents will share for only a few more years. Early evening, they have not yet turned from each other in sleep, their bodies curved, parentheses framing the separate lives they'll wake to. Dreaming, I am again the child with too many questions, the endless why and why and why my mother cannot answer, her mouth closed, a gesture toward her future, cold lips stitched shut. The lines in my young father's face deepen toward an expression of grief. I have come home from the schoolyard with the words that shadow us in this small southern town. Peckerwood and nigger lover, half-breed and zebra, words that take shape outside us. We're huddled on the tiny island of bed, quiet in the language of blood. The house unsteady on its cinder block haunches, sinking deeper into the muck of ancestry. Oil lamps flicker around us, our shadows dark glyphs on the wall, bigger and stranger than we are. Incident. We tell the story every year. How we peered from the windows, shades drawn.
Though nothing really happened, the charred grass now green again.
We peered from the windows, shades drawn, at the cross trussed like a Christmas tree.
The charred grass still green. Then we darkened our rooms, lit the hurricane lamps.
At the cross, trussed like a Christmas tree, a few men gathered, white as angels in their gowns.
We darkened our rooms and lit hurricane lamps, the wicks trembling in their fonts of oil.
It seemed the angels had gathered, white men in their gowns. When they were done, they left quietly. No one came.
The wicks trembled all night in their fonts of oil. By morning, the flames had all dimmed.
When they were done, the men left quietly. No one came. Nothing really happened.
By morning, all the flames had dimmed.
We tell the story every year. Providence. What's left is footage. The hours before Camille, 1969. Hurricane parties, palm trees leaning in the wind, fronds blown back, a woman's hair. Then after, the vacant lots, boats washed ashore, a swamp where graves had been. I recall how we huddled all night in our small house, moving between rooms, emptying pots filled with rain. The next day, our house, on its cinder blocks, seemed to float in the flooded yard. No foundation beneath us, nothing I could see tying us to the land. In the water, our reflection trembled, disappeared when I bent to touch it. Monument. Today the ants are busy beside my front steps, weaving in and out of the hill they're building. I watch them emerge and, like everything I've forgotten, disappear into the subterranean, a world made by displacement. In the cemetery last June, I circled, lost. Weeds and grass grown up all around, the landscape blurred and waving. At my mother's grave, ants streamed in and out like arteries, a tiny hill rising above her untended plot. Bit by bit, red dirt piled up, spread like a rash on the grass. I watched a long time the ants' determined work, how they brought up soil of which she will be part and piled it before me. Believe me when I say I've tried not to begrudge them their industry. This reminder of what I haven't done. Even now, the mound is a blister on my heart. A red and humming swarm.
From Alan Tate. Now that the salt of their blood stiffens the saltier oblivion of the sea,
Elegy for the Native Guards. We leave Gulfport at noon. Gulls overhead, trailing the boat, streamers, noisy fanfare, all the way to Ship Island. What we see first is the fort, its roof of grass, a lee, half reminder of the men who served there, a weathered monument to some of the dead. Inside we follow the ranger, hurried though we are to get to the beach. He tells of graves lost in the Gulf, the island split in half when Hurricane Camille hit, shows us casemates, cannons, the store that sells souvenirs, tokens of history long buried. The Daughters of the Confederacy has placed a plaque here at the fort's entrance. Each Confederate soldier's name raised hard in bronze. No names carved for the Native Guards. 2nd Regiment, Union men, Black Phalanx. What is monument to their legacy? All the grave markers, all the crude headstones, water lost. Now fish dart among their bones, and we listen for what the waves intone. Only the fort remains, near 40 feet high, round, unfinished, half open to the sky, the elements, wind, rain, God's deliberate eye.
From E.O. Wilson. Homo sapiens is the only species to suffer psychological exile.
South. I returned to a stand of pines, bone-thin phalanx flanking the roadside, tangle of understory, a dialectic of dark and light, and magnolias blossoming like afterthought, each flower a surrender, white flags draped among the branches. I returned to Land's End, the swath of coast, clear-cut and buried in sand, mangrove, live oak, gulfweed, raised and replaced by thin palms, palmettos, symbols of victory or defiance, over and over marking this vanquished land. I returned to a field of cotton, hallowed ground, as slave legend goes, each bowl holding the ghosts of generations, those who measured their days by the heft of sacks and lengths of rows, whose sweat flecked the cotton plants still sewn into our clothes. I returned to a country battlefield where colored troops fought and died. Port Hudson, where their bodies swelled and blackened beneath the sun, unburied until Earth's green sheet pulled over them, unmarked by any headstones, where the roads, buildings, and monuments are named to honor the Confederacy, where that old flag still hangs. I return to Mississippi, state that made a crime of me. Mulatto, half-breed, native, in my native land. This place, they'll bury me. For my mother, Gwendolyn Ann Turnbow, in memory.
This is the Alliance Theatre production of Native Guard by Natasha Trethewey, directed for radio by Rosalind Ayres, starring January LaVoy as the poet and Thomas Neal Antoine Ghant as the Native Guard, featuring Nicole Banks-Long on vocals and Tyrone Jackson on piano. Off-site producer for the Alliance Theatre, Danya Washington. Composer and music director, Tyrone Jackson. Original sound design, Clay Benning. Production assistant, Amanda Allen. Senior radio producer, Ronn Lipkin. Recording engineer, Erikson. Associate producer, studio production coordinator, and mixing engineer, Mark Holden. Recorded at the Invisible Studios, West Hollywood. Native Guard by Natasha Trethewey, used by permission of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, all rights reserved. Conceived and originally produced by the Alliance Theatre, Atlanta, Georgia, and directed by Susan V. Booth, artistic director. Mike Schliefer, managing director. This recording was produced with the generous support of the Poetry Foundation. I'm Susan Loewenberg, producing director of LA Theatre Works.